So if you go and visit an oncologist in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that oncologist may use Watson to help diagnose you. Watson's IBM's AI technology. Watson's reading lots and lots of journals about cancer and will help the doctor make a better decision for you. It's kind of happening today. And we just talked about blockchain. These guys, Pangea, are looking at how you can use a blockchain to enable people to buy fractions of property. So when we start to talk about things like making it easier for people to get on the ladder, making it easier for people to invest in property, these sorts of guys are going after this kind of space. Just to kind of finish off a bit, you probably read in the press about Google teaching computers to play this insanely hard game called Alphago, which is kind of impressive, but the really impressive thing is they've now taught the computer to teach itself. So they've got a computer that can learn the rules of a game and become an expert in it. So it's a self-learning machine, which, again, as somebody who grew up in the 80s and studied computer science, is really, really kind of mad, particularly when you put it together with a robot that can do backflips. But I don't know whether I don't think my video will work, but Google the video if you haven't seen it already. We're basically this far away from Arnold Schwarzenegger and a Terminator that can self-learn and do backflips and chase after you and do all these sorts of kind of slightly scary slightly scary things. So as an organisation that's 150 years old, that's absolutely part of government, that's going to remain part of government, how do we respond to that? How do we think about our role in this world that's changing so very rapidly with robots and AI and drones and so on and so forth? And in particular, how do we meet the future expectations of our customers, many of whom might be in the room, as well as our kind of more traditional customers, conveyancers, lenders, and so on. So the approach we take is an open innovation approach. So this book was written by a guy called Henry Cheeseborough in the early 2000s, and in essence it says you get a better outcome if you invite your friends to come and help you innovate. And that's absolutely part of the thinking that we have in Land Registry. You can see that fairly and squarely downstairs in one of the conference booths where we're working with Ordnance Survey on a program called Geovation that's taking innovative new startups and incubating them, helping them do interesting things in the geospatial and property sectors. But in a kind of more applied way, we've also been working with folks across the industry on a project called Digital Street. And Digital Street's about making the property buying process as straightforward as possible. It's about doing that using a digital, a digital land register. So we think as the organisation that kind of knows what you all own, as the organisation that's there at the beginning of the conveyancing process, where people are asking questions of Land Registry, do you really own it? What rights and restrictions are there about that property? And the people that are there at the end, when you change the property from me to you as I sell my property, we think we're really, really central to that process and want to make sure that our data is as accessible as possible. So we got a bunch of people together from across the industry, so everybody from folks like the Conveyancing Association and the Coal Authority, Government Digital Services, to some startups that were so new they didn't even have logos when we put the slide together, as well as folks like Law Society, Knight Frank, Purple Bricks, etc., folks sort of somewhere in the middle. We spent a bunch of time with them talking about the pain of the existing process, so talking to users, understanding how it works today, talking to people that are currently buying houses, lenders, etc., etc., and then thinking about how you could solve those sorts of their problems, understand their needs better, and start to make things easier. The underlying theme was data, and kind of as Paul said, it was all about if you can provide the right data to the right people at the right times, then you can make the process of buying a house an awful lot easier. So we did a lot of work with posts. A lot of Post-it notes died in the creation of this project, but we looked at all of the data sets that people wanted and why they weren't available, and we realised that actually the majority of those data sets are available in the public sector. So there are bits of government that have information about whether a house is going to drop down a mine shaft, who owns their property, what the rights and restrictions are on the property, whether it's going to flood, etc., etc. And that government perhaps could do a better job of making that data more available. So then we worked with a bunch of other partners to look at how we could create a fully digital register. So all of the information you could ever possibly want to know about a property, all in one place on an entirely machine-readable, three-dimensional database. We did that for 10 properties in the southwest of England. So you had this really rich data set that told you, just like I say, everything you might possibly want to know about a property. And then we got a bunch of people together who were smart developers, but not insanely smart developers. They were kind of, not PhD, MIT research guys. These were regular developers, which is important, not me damning them with faint praise, but it's important to know how far we were able to come with developers that you guys will have in your organizations. We got them together, we split them into 4 teams, and we asked them to work on 3 proof of concepts over 2 days. So these proof of concepts were built on top of this fully digital register with all the information you could possibly want to know about a property. And we focused those 3 proof of concepts on the needs we'd identified with users earlier in the process. So the first need was around conveyancing and due diligence. So today, if I go and buy a house, I agree to buy a house sold subject to contract, and I don't really know about it. So I've gone on Rightmove, I've worked out whether I'm paying the right kind of price, I've worked out that it's in the right catchment area for schools, I've worked out how long it's going to take me to get to work, I've had a look around, it looks okay, but I don't know whether it's going to drop down a mine shaft. The Coal Authority know, but I don't know, and I've already made a decision to buy your house. Perhaps I'm in the middle of a chain as well. I've also told somebody that I'm about to buy your house, and you've agreed to buy mine. I also don't understand whether there are any rights or restrictions on the property that might affect my enjoyment. So maybe I'm a small business and I want to run my business from home, and there's a restriction on the property inside the land registry that means I can't run that business from home. All of these things I then subsequently find out over a period of, like we were saying, over a period of perhaps up to 6 weeks, perhaps even longer, as my conveyancer runs around searching various different databases inside government and working with some of the personal search companies to understand really what I need to know about that house, and what I really what's kind of hidden under the tip of the iceberg that's the house that I've fallen in love with. And we thought we could make that easier by, again, bringing the data into one place and then enabling a chatbot that you can talk to ask questions about a property. Second thing I have to do, once I've fallen in love with the house, I have to find a mortgage. So it's really neat. I can go online and I can do a decision in principle, and I can get that instantly. I can put in how much I earn, how much I want to borrow, price of the property, how long I want to borrow it for, and the lender will tell me, yeah, good news, you can buy, we'll lend you £100,000 to buy a house. However, I then have to go through a process of actually applying for my mortgage, and that can take an awful lot longer. I probably need to buy myself a printer first of all, because I need to print out my P60 and my bank statements and so on and so forth. And that can take a couple of weeks, and that's, again, a level of uncertainty that's baked into the process that we thought we could get rid of. So again, we work with lenders to think about the algorithms they use today to approve mortgages and work on whether we could approve mortgages instantly. So give people instant mortgage offers rather than decisions in principle. And then finally, we looked at the last bit of the process. So once I've agreed to buy a house, I've got the funds, I then need to review a contract, sign a contract, and then the funds need to exchange. So we need to pay my stamp duty, pay off my old mortgage, pay off the seller's mortgage, deposit the rest of the money in the seller's account, and so on. And that, again, is a whole bunch of the bit of the process that really manual today and really tricky for people to kind of push their way through. So conveyancers spend a lot of time achieving people along and moving money and making phone calls and so on. So what I wanted to do now is show you those 3 proof of concepts in action. We also have a stand roughly in the middle of the hall downstairs where you can also go and see it in slower time. So the first one's this property assistant. So like I said, it's a chatbot that, in a sense, performs some of the role of a conveyancer. So this person's buying a house for the first time, so it tells them on the left-hand side of the screen what you need to do. So if you've never bought a house before, it's kind of a scary kind of a process. Then we go and ask about the property we're interested in. This property's anonymised, by the way, but we did this on some real properties in the southwest, and it tells you the things you need to know, coloured red, green or amber, based on whether you need to care about it or not. So we first of all ask about ground hazards, and we go after the Coal Authority and we get some of their data and tell you that unfortunately the house that you've just fallen in love with, you've maybe even picked curtains for, you've maybe changed your children's school, is built on a mine shaft, and you might want to get an extra report from the Coal Authority to work out whether that's a big deal or not. Then goes on to ask about flood risk. So this is information from the Environment Agency, and it just tells you that not to worry, the house isn't built in a floodplain. These two are two restrictions that are currently on the land register. So a business restriction and another restricted covenant. So this first one, again, today you would ask a conveyancer to search the land registry, to read a PDF that we send them, and to interpret this for you. And you can see there, so this particular restriction for this property, that's a real life property but anonymised for the demo, tells you that you can't run a business from the house. Again, it's really useful to know that up front before you fall in love with it and make an offer to somebody that actually you probably want to bail out on later on. We then went a bit nuts and linked the chatbot to a whole bunch of other open data. So it tells you about crime in the local area, shows you a picture of the back garden, shows you what it looks like on Street View, all sorts of things. But you kind of get the picture. So I'm just going to skip the demo one a sec. Do you know where the video control's gone? The next demo I'm going to have to describe to you. So next demo is the digital mortgage offer. So what you do is you go online and you type in the address of the property that you're interested in. You sign to say that you are you, and what then happens is this algorithm from the proof of concept then talks to the digital register to understand everything there is to know about the property. So, for example, the lender's really interested in whether that property has a long or a short lease. It gets that information from the register and uses that to help make a decision. Likewise, it then connects to my bank account through the open banking APIs, and it also connects to the HMRC's API to work out what I earned last year. Uses those two pieces of information along with an automated valuation model that we didn't actually bake into the proof of concept to then make a decision on whether to lend me money or not. So in concept, if you like, we were able to show how you could get a mortgage offer done instantly. Clearly, you'd need to work on things like advising the customer thereafter. But what we're showing is that you're able to take this bit of the process that currently is quite paper-based and can take quite a long time and make it as straightforward as possible. The final demo is about the movement of funds. So what happens is, and about signing of contracts. So what happens if you have two parties? The first party, the seller, configures a contract, configures their own contract to sell their house. And that wasn't an idea that came from us, that was an idea that came from one of the conveyancers. Having configured that contract, they then sign it using their thumb on a mobile phone. So, me, John, wants to sell 55 Acacia Avenue. I'm going to include the lights and the carpets. Here's my kind of boilerplate contract that's been configured to me. Here's a few things that I've changed, and I've now signed it with my thumb. That contract then goes to the buyer, who reviews it, again, signs it with their thumb. As soon as they've signed it, so that's kind of neat. There's no pens, paper, witnesses to be involved. But as soon as they've signed it, the contract is smart. The contract automates parts of the process. As soon as the buyer signs the contract, the deposit is taken from their account and moved up into escrow. And in signing the contract, they also agree a completion date that they've kind of mutually agreed and both signed up to. Having then reached that completion date, the remaining steps in the process are then automated. So at the completion date, the buyer's mortgage is drawn down, the seller's mortgage is paid off, the remainder of the funds are put into the seller's account, and the land register is updated, the stamp duty is paid, and I think that's about it. Yeah, and land register is updated, stamp duty is paid, mortgages are paid off. So that remaining part of the process is all entirely automated. So this is the demo for the digital mortgage. Again, we kind of anonymised the banks, but the key point here is the logic inside that application is kind of based on the real life logic that real lenders would do, and we worked through that with both Nationwide and Atom Bank. And this is the last bit of the process. This is the bit I was talking about, the seller configuring their own contract and then signing that, adding some additional terms, sending it across to the buyer, and then the remainder of the process being automated. This is literally like minute or two left that I'll just show you. We built all of this on top of a blockchain. The reason we did that is because each step the reason we did that is twofold really. One, because we wanted to understand more about blockchain technology. We hear a lot about it and how it can be used in land registration. And two, it gave us a bunch of kind of features for free. It gave us some smart contract technology for free, and it also gave us the ability to check every step in this process and have a kind of permanent, indelible record that John did sign this contract, John's deposit's now been paid, etc., etc. So each of these steps in the transaction are all recorded onto a blockchain register. So I'll just let that whiz to the end just to give you the idea. And I'll show you the bit at the end with the obligatory blockchain demonstration with a load of hashes in the database that prove to you that we really did do it on top of a blockchain. So yeah, I think the point of the demo and the point of us doing this piece of work is because, like I say, as an organisation that exists at the beginning and at the end of the property transaction process, we think it's really important to enable these sorts of innovations. What I should say is that we're working on these things with people across the industry. We're not saying that conveyancing should all be done through chatbots. We're not saying that land registry is going to get involved in conveyancing or lending or anything like that. We're saying that by working with the industry, but to understand the pros and cons of some of these new technologies and approaches, we can do a better job of being the world's best land registry. We want it. To use Paul's words, it's user needs work for us. It's understanding the needs and wants of the market and understanding how we can enable more of that innovation. So my apologies for my demo, but yeah, there you go. There's it all got written to the blockchain, obligatory hashes. So yeah, that was the end of my presentation. So just to say, we're really keen to talk to anybody that's interested in what we did last year. So like I say, there's a booth down in the middle of the floor. We're just about to start in year 2 of Digital Street, and what we want to do in year 2 is do the first entirely digital property transaction. So we've just launched the first digital mortgage deed signing service, so enabling people to sign their mortgage deeds digitally rather than with pen and paper. And next year we want to do a real-life property transaction from one person to another and do that entirely digitally. So if you're interested in working with us on that, either as a participant that wants to kind of write code and come along to sessions, or just interested in hearing a bit more about some of that work, then give us a shout. Thank you very much.